Imagine if you have your vision as the car with the right team. Imagine how quick that vision will come into the footsteps. Something that was taking 5 years takes 3 months.
This morning is all about leadership and influence.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to it. It is today we are on at 10. Usually we on 9 o'clock, but we got a very, very interesting conversation today and a very, very, very interesting guest. I'm looking forward to this conversation. But as you know, I haven't been on the set in a while with Mr. Varrie, and he is with us today. Larry, what's happening, my brother? Thank you for coming through this morning.
Thank you, Zakes, man. It's a pleasure to be back. I'm very excited to delve into this very important conversation about decolonizing the RAND. And we obviously have a very special guest with us, Mr. Peter Boraine. Maybe you want to introduce yourself there, Peter, so our guests know who we're sitting with today.
Thanks there, Larry. Also good to meet you, Zakes. As you know, I'm Peter Boraine. I've been born and grown in Johannesburg. Traditionally, had the opportunity to study and work at the same time as I built my career. Had a passion for being in the technology sector at the time, but drifted out into economic development, where I also worked for institutions such as the IDC. I also then ran various economic development initiatives for multinationals such as Microsoft, which was quite a successful empowerment program at the time. We invested directly just over 472 million into small black enterprises to make them globally competitive. And with that, joined various organizations in the economic development space. I currently serve in an organization called the South African Supplier Diversity Council, where I look at our multinational and corporate members, as well as look at other stakeholder engagements, where we drive various projects on economic development with organizations such as the GIZ, and of late, one of our new partners being Cecil, but various other multinationals out there, such as your Cummins, your MSDs in the pharmaceutical industry, Accentures, etc. And the list just goes on, looking at how do we work with them to further transform our small businesses to be more economically active, create jobs, and develop our people. So that's where I'm from.
So you'd say you large at the moment in the SMME space?
Yeah, so we largely look quite extensively in the development of SMMEs through supply chains of big corporate businesses that we partner with.
Okay, so Larry, we've been on this mission, right? And we've been speaking more particularly about the brown nation and about, just the injustices of the past. And I don't know if ever you've seen Larry, he goes on to these shows and he has these robust discussions and debates as it relates to just, injustices that we've had to endure in the past, and some of the injustices has been corrected as it relates to economic empowerment. But we understand that there was something that has been brought in called the black economic empowerment. But we also understood that as time continued, we realized that the black economic empowerment doesn't really have much out for people unless you what they call African in particular, which means you must be, darker skinned and you must have a black surname, and you must be in that space to qualify for a lot of these things. So they don't say they say that it's not the case, but in reality we understand that it is the case. And so we've been on this mission to try and see what can we do and what kind of conversations can we have with people like yourself and others in the space where they are in spaces where they can make a difference and where they can really move the agenda forward as it relates to just empowering, especially the brown people in South Africa. And of course, small to medium enterprise space is a massive space, right? And I don't know, Larry, would you like to jump in with something before I really get into some of the questions here?
Yeah. Look, I think the most important thing and what we are specific on is the KHOI-SAN community and their erasure, the government's intentional erasure of that specific community since the inception of democracy. And understanding that there's various role players in the restoration of these people, the KHOI-SAN community. And also understanding in today's conversation that economic development is a crucial part of restoring one's dignity, because if you do not have access to these things, you will remain a poor person. And if you don't have money, you can't do anything. So it's about tapping into that space and realizing that there are people, there are businesses that have a role to play. And I think today's conversation is understanding what is that role that businesses need to play in the restoration of the KHOI-SAN peoples as a nation. So part of the things that I'm hoping we can really explore today is the role of business in the KHOI-SAN struggle. And I'm hoping, Peter, you can just maybe share with us what your thoughts are on the role that business has to play in the KHOI-SAN struggle, because these are people and institutions that are effectively going to benefit from the hard-fought victories of people that are poor, that have been fighting the KHOI-SAN struggle. So we would like to know what, in your view, what the role of business in the KHOI-SAN struggle.
So I think, Larry, that's quite an interesting question there, and based on where we've come from and where we're heading, and trying to unpack all of these things going forward, so really from a business perspective, if we look at it, the business sector, has really over the last 400 years, benefited through the colonial ways of doing business, extracting minerals and resources from land actually owned by the KHOI-SAN, right? And there's never really been any true beneficiation for the people across these various industries in what they were doing. So it's really, how do we build and how do we relook at these territories, etc., and what has been done to it to date, and how do we then bring back that beneficiation back to the people, the rightful people of that land. If you look at it since 2024, it's less than 1% of bee procurement transactions had gone to so-called KHOI-SAN communities, despite them being part of the First Nation status. And also, if you look at it from centuries of being deprived or depossessed from these opportunities, it's really been unfair, and it's at a point of how do we correct this now going forward by looking at what role legislation is playing and how do we advance legislation in these areas with the right people involved in driving those business sectors.
I have a question, Peter. Do you think it's realistic to assume that somebody who has a mine that is withdrawing minerals, be it gold, diamonds, coal, whatever it is, that there's a lot of mines, all iron ore, all around South Africa in particular. And as you rightfully pointed out, a lot of these mines were originally the KHOI-SAN land where these mines were founded on, or where they're still operating from today. Is it then, would you say it's realistic to expect that the mine owners turns around and says, hey, listen, we actually want to acknowledge the fact that we need to highlight that this land historically actually belonged to the Khoi and the San? Do you think it's realistic for them to turn around and say, do you think it's something they'll do?
I think what we need to look at is the role that legislation and government needs to play in this. Going forward, if you look at the sort of United Nations Declaration of Indigenous People, and the various acts, governing the Khoi and the San, and articles within those declarations, how serious is our government taking it? Is there a voice for our people, so that government can listen, and that the government can then better instruct industry, business, and communities about the importance of this?
I think also there's a case that we always talk about, and that is one of the most fundamental cases in dealing with anything pertaining to the KHOI-SAN. That is the Richtersveld case versus the Richtersveld community versus the Alexco Limited.
Yeah.
And what you've mentioned, Zakes, in terms of whether these owners of these mines being white companies, and some of them even state companies, because Alexco Limited is a state company. And the government, nobody thought that the KHOI-SAN community would win that case, because it would mean that the Constitution speaks about a 1913 limitation when it comes to land, and the minerals is in the land. And the KHOI-SAN community, Mandela never thought they were going to win that case, and so did Thabo Mbeki during the transition of that administration from Nelson Mandela to Thabo Mbeki. Nobody thought that the KHOI-SAN community is going to win that case, and that the company, Alexco Limited, would need to give 51% of the returns of that company to the people, the Richtersveld community. So that was a huge precedent, and it can be applied everywhere else. Why that is not being advanced in these different mining communities? I think we need to look at that as an indigenous community, as KHOI-SAN people, understand why is it that all of these other mining companies, and it's not just mining companies, but we're making an example of mining companies, what are they doing, what are the people doing, or what are we doing to make sure that, the people of those areas, or the KHOI-SAN community as a whole, are benefiting from these mines that have been for hundreds of years extracting minerals from there. So I think in terms of that, what you're saying, legislature has a role to play. They're supposed to develop the law in accordance with the constitutional precedents that was set in that case. I think, in terms of answering that.
Yeah, I hear you, but who then will drive that agenda forward? Because an agenda like that is going to require a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of intention to be driven forward. Who in particular was driving for that Richtersveld case?
Well, the community and the LRC, Labor Legal Resources Center. But the point is this: if you look at when that case took place in 2003, 2004, 2003 Supreme Court of Appeal, 2004 Constitutional Court, it's 20 years later. It is unfathomable, it is unthinkable that nothing could have been achieved in the last 20 years. Now, I know government is hell-bent on making sure that the KHOI-SAN community doesn't get what belongs to them, because it pushes them out of the equation. And we've been clear that we are not here to push people out of the equation. We want to be part in the sharing of the devolution of power as a First Nation peoples. So I think that is the question, is, yes, going back and seeing what has been done over the past 20 years. There has absolutely nothing been done. Has there been processes that have been started? How do institutions that people may be listening, how do they get involved and say, right, there are ongoing processes. How can we start, contributing to those processes there to make sure that minerals and mineral rights are being restored to the First Nation? So, yeah, that's what I think in terms of the question that you asked.
I think also, just to add to that, if you look at the TKLA Act 3 of 2019, where it recognizes the KHOI and the SAN traditional leadership and governance structures. From a legal perspective, there's recognition. It's really, how do we take that now and we translate it into economic rights, which now includes the rights of the land, the communities, getting the operating development agencies involved, and also, negotiating proper investment deals on behalf of our communities and territories, because there's an act that we can lean on from a legal perspective. It's about how do we drive that going forward now, and getting the right recognition for what has been acted, so that we could then progress.
So you're saying the recognition is there?
Yes.
There is recognition on that part. So again, go for it.
I was going to say, sorry. The act, for me personally, and the organizations that I belong to, we are 100% against those acts. Obviously, save for the recognition part of the act. Because what the act does is it assimilates us forcefully into a Bantu tribal structure. And we are not Bantu people. We are distinct people. We are not greater than or superior to other people, but we are different people, and we want to be respected as different people. Yeah. And this system, we know the intention. It can never have taken them 31 years to create the act. When it took Bantu, the government, 2 years, in 1996, they gave the Bantu community the chapter 12 in the Constitution, and still today we have nothing. We have this act. So even though I understand the reasoning behind possibly what you're saying is that there is something for us to work from, there is some form of an act in government, and let's see how we can best use that act. But yeah, in terms of the question that I wanted to ask you, because I'm of the view that we need to move away from a victim mindset and towards having a winner's mentality. But it's also important for us to understand our problems and to find a solution to that problem. And for me, I think in this conversation, if we can drive it towards, being more, we identify problems, but we find the solution to that, so that we can also move our people out of a victim mindset that, there's nothing for us. Yes, there's nothing for us, but the responsibility lies with us to change our disposition. So the question that I want to ask you, considering the experience that you have in the business field, is how do we move from being invisible in the system to being architects of our own system?
That's an interesting question, and I think there's a lot of avenues that maybe need to be addressed in that. If we look at it, there's a lot of discussions around, do the KHOI-SAN or the First Nation look at putting together what they call is a development finance corporation to look at sustaining their area and their people and growing them economically. That's from one sector. Then from another sector perspective is, as much as we have the B codes and there's inputs that have been done now into the amendments, it would have been, I'm not sure if there has been any inputs done from the KHOI-SAN where they would basically say within the B codes where we have the designations, where you have it put under black, being African, Indian, colored, but actually have KHOI-SAN being a recognized level within the B codes for transformation to happen at an economic level for the KHOI-SAN people. So I think that could be also a good start to start working with the Ministry of DTIC as the people of the KHOI-SAN. And
what's DTIC? What does that represent?
The Department of Trade, Industry and Cooperation.
Okay.
So it's the DTI, yeah.
In your experience, Peter, what strategies actually work to position KHOI-SAN entrepreneurs as equals in the economic field?
So my experience has been very vast across all people of color to bring that forward. And I think the biggest challenge that we always face with is, how do we take our people's mindset, even socially, away from thinking of entitlement, right, and moving into a mainstream of economic development. There's a number of initiatives from various organizations, international donors, local large corporations that look at empowering organizations. I think we also need to move away from the mindset of, when you see something coming forward, that it's not for me, it's only for a certain grouping. Sometimes we ourselves exclude ourselves from participation, because we have the perception of seeing the majority in the country being the ones being only recognized for opportunities, that's benefiting from those opportunities. But if we go back and if we talk about successful people, we have a lot of our own that are sitting in those fields that empower some of our own. I think it's about us, like, from a network perspective as well, getting closer or having these open discussions with some of our own, because at the end of the day, I think where we also face challenges sometimes is, and it's a discussion I had yesterday as well, where the person says to me, and this is, unfortunately, it's a white person that's telling me that our people don't support each other. I say, you know what? We all say that. I know other groupings saying the same thing. But it's not that. It's the issue of we sit with a challenge of classism that creates the disparity between people and opportunity, and who sits around, who gets a chair around the table. And that becomes the challenge. So it's not so much that our people don't support one another.
Classism within our own community.
Yes. So certain people will working on business will only associate with certain people. They wouldn't, and from a class perspective, they feel they're better than other people. So the upliftment doesn't really happen in a balanced way we hope it must happen. So, and it happens across all races in this country. And that's one thing I always say. And how I got to do some research on that. I was once driving with a Jewish person, and he put his phone on speakerphone, and he borrowed money from this Jewish fund that you think the Jews look after each other. And he was really being given not a good call. And I said, but I thought you support each other. He said, it's not like that. You might think it's like that. And then I spoke to different people and sort of races and people, and you find out that it's actually certain people only looking after certain people within that. There's support, but at a different level. You need to grow to get into that. You know, and sometimes we too much say that we don't want to support each other. But what type of support do we want? What are we looking for? You know, do we articulate it correctly? And to what degree do we align ourselves to get to the right support? You know.
Look, on the point you're making, there's something busy rising up in that space and in the communication space as it relates to exactly that topic. And one of the reasons I like, I'm going to mention some names for the sake of the conversation, right? People like Larry, people like even Ashley Salts, people like what Gaten is even doing now, is that the conversation, and there's many others, right? Many other guys, but the conversation is now starting to become a lot more robust, point-driven, and also fact-driven. It's like the conversation, and I don't know, maybe I can ask this as a question. Do you think it benefits us more to come from a factual perspective as opposed from an emotional perspective? Because we know as our people, we very, especially Africans in general, South Africans in general, we storytellers, we get emotional, we get into the detail, the meat and potatoes of the story, we feel the story. But there's a different thing busy rising to the top now, where I'm sensing that people are becoming more robust and fact-based. Like, even if you watch some of these debates, including the debates that you are a part of, it's very much like, this happened this year, that happened this year, this is what we're asking for, and that's it. I'm not interested in your emotions. I'm not interested in how you feel about it. I'm asking you, I'm almost borderline telling you that this is what our request is. And it goes back to the point that you're making now. It's that we complain that there's a lack of support. We complain that we don't support one another. And then you went on to say that maybe we should be more clear about what we want.
Yeah, but my question also would be in light of this, and I think that is a very critical point, because it will push us over to either side, or it will keep us here or push us over. And that question is, how do we move from, like you said, that handout mindset? How do we move away from that? How do we move away from the we are left out narrative to, without ignoring the injustices that has happened? How do we move away from that into the building legacy phase? You understand what I'm saying? How do we actively do that? Being in the fields that you've worked, because those are developmental fields, those are empowering institutions that you've worked for and with. How do institutions like that, or us, how do we use institutions like that to get ourselves out of these things and not expecting handouts from people?
So I think in light of that question and the discussion we're having, it's really what you're saying is, how do we take ourselves beyond survival entrepreneurs, right? And really become thriving businesses within various markets. Now, when we look at how certain markets are controlled in business, it's all about networks, right? We can call it what we want to. It's about networks. Sales makes business, and you have to sell. And also one of the biggest challenges that we do have when we look at what's happening around enterprise and supply development initiatives, institutions put a lot of money in developing small businesses. But small businesses sometimes don't take the initiative once they're being developed because they become complacent in receiving those grant type funding from these big multinationals and not accelerating themselves in their own capacity to grow further. I had a discussion again with another client yesterday, a multinational, where and we were discussing another multinational where somebody sat on a beneficiary program for 9 years, where they had to graduate after 3 years, which means they blocked the opportunity for other minority or small black businesses to enter that space because they're not being progressive to grow. So it really becomes challenging, and also, critical to business. If you look at it, when packaging and putting businesses together, there is a lot of what they call statutory documents that we find that our people lack. I mean, we did a survey or a study. At the time, I wasn't with the Business Council, but we always reference back to the project that we did for the Gauteng provincial government many years ago, where we sampled, or we had to look at 2,600 businesses that were registered and on CSD, which shows they were compliant. But through our due diligence process, which multinationals use, right? We found out only 300 of those businesses were actually compliant to do business, right? So sometimes we find out that there's certain things that's not up to date, that's statutory in our businesses that we don't have, that blocks us from opportunities, and we don't understand these things. So there's a lot of fundamentals sometimes that we need to put into place. I had an experience where I was once approached by some youth, and I got very furious because they were told by somebody to go register a company. They now registered a company and they asked themselves, what are we going to do? That's not the way you need to build and support people. How is business grown? How is business generated? Quite simple. You have an idea or you see a gap in the market and you start servicing it. You then start growing and you then start formalizing your business, or you formalize it and then you start putting everything in place. But you don't go register a company. It stands there. Now the company must do business. What business is it going to do? So if your vision, and is not clear in what you want to do, and your objectives aren't clear, you're not going to go anywhere, and I think that sometimes is what we lack, in relation to taking things to the next level. It's like, really, what is it that you want to do, and then drive that. Also, I mean, if we look at businesses that have been around, and there's a lot of our own people that own multi-billion rand organizations. Multi-billion rand organizations. I'm talking people of our own color. Colored people that own multi-billion rand organizations.
That you are aware of?
Yes, plenty. Right?
Are you serious?
Yes. Some of them have taken 20, 30, 40 years to get there. That's the reality. The challenge we're faced with is our people are setting up businesses and hoping they're going to make the first 10 million in the first year. And that's also something we need to look at.
Unrealistic expectations.
There's unrealistic expectations on that they put out there on themselves, and then also they don't put all the fundamentals in the business correct.
Would you say bribery and corruption is a pitfall as well?
Look, I think firstly, bribery and corruption is a global problem, right? And it's definitely a pitfall. I think it's been shown in the media. It's shown all over what it's actually doing to businesses. It's actually eroding profits, right? And those profits could be put to better use in expanding those businesses, employing more people.
To use that profit to pay bribes and to kind of pay your way through to the top.
Yes. And most of the people that have businesses that are doing bribery and corruption, they will tell you, at the end of the day, when they look at what that contract was worth and what they got out, it's like, why did I do it anyway?
It can break even still.
Yeah, it's like...
So all that effort was just for break even.
Exactly.
Or maybe even a bit of a loss.
Yeah, and it's... The sad thing is now, if you have a business and you're building a family legacy and you start the business off the wrong foot, what is that legacy going to look like?
If you're saying you're starting it off already with something under the table.
Exactly, and now it's a legacy family business. You're bringing your kids into the business. You now have to teach them the wrong way to survive.
The foundation of the business was
wrong.
based on.
So those are critical things that we also need to look at from a society perspective, and how it really unconsciously impacts us. Because sometimes we don't see it on the surface. But unconsciously it's happening, and it's destroying a lot.
Because I'm sensing that could also be one of the challenges to where you come. Because, in fact, I'm not sensing it, I know it for a fact. When you come, you were speaking about having your paperwork in place, having your registrations in your documents and all those elements in place. So now you come and you, for example, you tender for something, right? And let's say you qualify on all levels. You qualify with experience, you qualify with BEE certificates, with your compliance, everything is in order. You get there, and I've seen this over and over, and I know people in that space, and they tell me, brother, this happens literally. It's basically the way of life at this point. You almost can't get away from it. Where it's a matter of, okay, we'll give you this, like you said just earlier about is it worth it at the end? We'll give you this 30 million rand contract here. And let's say you in the space of whatever space you're in, right? Let's say water. Okay, we're giving you this 30 million rand contract for you to set up 1, 2, 3, these 2 areas here. But we want this X amount.
And to add to that, and we mustn't be disillusioned. Private sector corruption is just as big as government. You'll be surprised. Maybe in some instances even bigger, even worse. Because the private sector they comply to laws, but they also write their own policies. So as an example, if you write a policy in a company around procurement, of which certain elements are wrong, and you're following the wrong elements, by the time you get audited and you follow the wrong elements that you put in order to benefit certain people,
or yourself in some way,
right? You get audited and you follow the wrong, your audit is 100% correct.
Because that's part of your
process. So it's all these things that sometimes we don't see through, or we don't see on the surface, or it's so well covered up that it forces those challenges. I mean, if you take private sector specifically, and as black businesses, we can't rely on government alone, right? There has to be a mix of your business. You can't. No business will survive on only one sector, right? And government can't service everybody, right? But if you look at it, sometimes what happens is certain industries, private sector industries put criteria in place that a black business will never meet in order to keep you out of the opportunity. It happens. I've seen it. I've experienced it. And it costs you money, which you don't have, to get there. So what you do is you never get the opportunity. So all they do is they raise certain barriers of entry into markets.
It becomes almost impossible for you.
Exactly. And you default, go look for business in government. Or you were selling blankets, and now you're saying there's an opportunity in tomatoes. And you now lose your focus because you want to survive. So it's very imperative to look at these things. We did a project also with just after COVID as well, and we had to look at businesses that had to survive and that moved away from their core. And after COVID, how do they come back into their core? It was quite difficult to service their core again because they weren't keeping abreast with certain things, and then they had to do other things to survive, and that kept them busy, and they couldn't now focus on their core business. So their quality and everything and their service delivery started suffering around their core. And we went in to help realign those businesses as well. So that's the type of
everyone started jumping into PPE, and everyone started trying to just see how they can survive, because it's like, hey bro, this thing that I'm selling, everything is locked down. I now need to find another way. And also there was big opportunities, which I believe that a lot of these things, as you mentioned earlier and pointed out, has purposely been structured in that way, but particularly to exclude certain people. I feel that you mentioned earlier, Peter, that there's guys that, especially that's already in our from our communities, guys that we know, that you said that comes from, for example, the Eldoses, the Rivalies, the Cape Messers, these places, the Westburys, that are killing the game on a high level. I would then suggest, because remember, we're trying to find solutions here. I think we can sit here and speak for 3 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours about the issues of our country. We're familiar with it. We're well familiar with it. It's on the radio all the time. It's on the news all the time. We know the corruption is at an all-time high. Ours here is to find, gents, what do we do from a solution-driven perspective to say that, okay, we're here now, we know this is the mountain we need to climb. How can we connect with these guys that have successfully, almost on a mentorship level, or coaching mentorship both level, to say, guys, you manage to successfully achieve what we're trying to achieve? Would it not then make sense to say, how can we connect with the guys that have figured it out already? Did they do it the clean way? Are they going to come to us and say, hey, bruh, I tried to stay clean, but I had to give this day and that day and that day just to survive? Because that's probably 10 to 1 what ended up happening for a lot of the guys. Like I said, the system is already rigged against you in that way. You mentioned something interesting earlier. You say the system is rigged in such a way that you can make the people who are making the policies are making it particular to serve themselves. So even if you look at something like taxes, where they take 40, 45, 46% of your income, and then you're driving past and the robots are cut off, and you're driving past and the grass is higher than you can't even see on the other side of the road, and you're driving past and they're burning rather the grass instead of actually executing on the thing. Then you sit there, and as an average South African, you sit there and you think, but now, can somebody explain to me why I'm giving away half of my salary? And can you show me exactly? Hold on, guys. What are you doing with you 60 million people, or whoever the employment percentage is? Half of our salaries has been taken. In the meanwhile, all the South African companies like SAA has folded. The police force has folded. Eskom has folded. So now, can someone explain to us where's our money actually going? And that makes us disgruntled. It makes us feel like we're working here, we're putting in the effort, but you guys are not coming to the table. And so the thing is this: if you're making rules to benefit yourself, and I'm servicing your, like you're saying, even if the auditor comes and the auditor says, but this person didn't do anything wrong because it's complying with the rules that they set in place. I mean, it's rigged against you either way. How do we then find solutions in that? Because I'm sure there's solutions. If car companies come out with ways, and the nice thing about especially our brown community is that we're very innovative people, right? Car company comes out with ways and says, you know what, we're going to do this now because we're seeing that car theft in South Africa is a big thing. We're going to now have keyless entry, right? What do our gents do? They figure out quick, fast, what chip does that key use? How does it work? How can we use an extended thing to bypass that thing? I can unlock your car with my own key. And I can start your car with this key. And I can sit with the computer and code your key from where I'm seated in the parking lot at the mall. So the truth of the matter is I'm making that example to show that we do have the brains to override the system. It's like, guys, we can come up with a plan here that, you made the system, we override it.
But we need to use that same innovation, that same brilliance, and try and find ways, identify problems, and use that to unlock our way into the system. So one of the questions that I want to ask you again, Peter, is can enterprise be used as a tool of resistance and restoration? Because we know that everything happens in the business sector, or a lot happens in that. Can enterprise be used as a tool of resistance and restoration?
So to align to that question, I definitely believe it can. I think when we look at building businesses, we should really we look at rebuilding what was colonialism had taken and destroyed, for us. I look at it from a perspective where a lot of people of color had the same level as traditional white people in a corporate company but earned less and they did more. There's a lot of these injustices that was done, and if you look at the ripple effect of that, and I always make reference to that firstly as an example, if you are on the same level earning less, right, naturally your household is going to be of a lesser household. Your education is going to be of a lesser because of the cost of education. So the person earning more will be able to afford a higher education for their kids. Person earning less, even at the same level. So that whole chain is at a lower level and gets kept there. So when we look deeper besides enterprises and we look into business, you're earning less in a big corporate at the same level as somebody that you should be earning the same. You're actually being disadvantaged in your family's growth because you can't give them more of your salary.
Stunts your growth altogether.
And it was done, some of these things are done strategically to exclude you, and exclude your generation type of thing. And it's where we need to look at these things and say, how do we address that as well? Which is an important factor even there before we even get to the business side. But definitely, enterprises would add value to that, and it's like, really, how do we go and reclaim, our land? How do we go and then enable our land? How do we go and feed our people, create jobs, and reassert our sovereignty, as you said, as the KHOI-SAN people, But this can only succeed if it's backed, with the right legal recognition and support. Like we said, maybe what they should consider within the new BEE Act is to put, like they've done for veterans, put provisions for KHOI-SAN people now.
But can we drive that agenda? Because look, whichever way you look at it, it's going to have to be like Peter is saying, somewhere, somehow it's going to have to be a legislative agenda, because then you can't exclude it. And then it's one of those things. I'm going to use Donald Trump's words: too big to rig. Can you have it to the point where you become so overwhelmingly successful, like when you were asking, can it be used as a tool or as a resistance tool? Can you become so overwhelmingly popular and successful to the point where you can't now ignore me? I'm bigger than you. Imagine there's a brown RAND company, right? That's bigger than Cecil. That's bigger than Investec. Because also these guys know how to finesse the system as well. Like you find...
Well, they're funding the government.
Yeah, they fund in the government.
Yeah.
Or you even find a situation where the guy has dual citizenship in another country. So he finesses it in such a way that he has an office there. I think Investec has offices in London. They have offices here. Then they know how to work their way around the tax issues. These guys are in the game. They wrote those laws, so they understand.
Look, for me, and to add to that, I always say, because we work with a lot of companies, and one of the biggest challenges right now, if we take BEE legislation and what it has done. So I always say, and I think I've told Larry this before, and then he kept quiet, and I think I'm going to say the same to you, and you might keep me quiet. There's a statement I always make. BEE has made more white millionaires than black millionaires. Do you know why I say so?
I believe you.
Right?
I believe
because if you look at the equity distribution, traditionally in BEE when it started, it was black ownership being African, Indian, colored of 25.1%. So if there was a 100 million rand deal, 74% of the profit still went to the white owner.
The 25.1%.
Right? So we need to really be critical and look into these things. One of the biggest challenges we face, as people, we erode our economic equity value, right? Through the process of fronting, right? What happens is, an opportunity comes, the guys say, we need you, not because of your skill. Yes, your skill is one thing, but we can control you. So we give you the shares, we put everything nicely as our BE partner. And we give you all the nice things.
You're just a pawn.
You're just a token, right? So you're actually eroding the true economic value of the next person that can compete with you to win that business. But because you're a token, you now win it, but you still don't get the true value of that, right? Because the way this,
just the puppet.
the way it's structured in the background, you don't see the true financial value of it.
The puppet master still pulling the strings.
Everything is monopolized in South Africa. We know. I mean, it's white monopoly in South Africa. Now, one of the things we have a court case in the Constitutional Court, an organization that I belong to, that specifically deals with the act, the Traditional KHOI-SAN and Leadership Act, setting that aside, save for the recognition clause. And we also have another element or aspect that case speaks to in the Concord, which is everything happens. The National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces are the two highest law-making bodies in the country. Anything else is just an advisory body, right? So this case that we have in the Constitutional Court speaks to our place in Parliament, because South Africa is meant to be this is meant to be a participatory democracy. Everyone must participate, but we're the only people that are not participating in this democracy. So we've come to understand that everything happens in the law. Everybody is governed by the law. Whether you like it, every part of your life is governed by the law. There's a law that deals with that. And we are not part of that law-making processes. And all of these laws, including a law like BEE, is being drafted and is passed by Parliament. And it's a law that excludes us. We've seen it maybe not just in the implementation of it, but in the writing. And if you read the actual law, it is meant to exclude. It is meant to benefit what they call African in particular, and we know who we refer to when we say that. And then white people know how to finesse that, like you're saying, to make them benefit out of the scheme.
Yeah.
But we've identified that we need to be part now in this conversation. We need to be part of lawmaking processes, right? And one of that, or the only way to be part of that, is to be part of Parliament, because Parliament makes the law.
Yes.
Right? And we have two or three people that I'm aware of that are in Parliament that are KHOI-SAN people. Glenn Tybosh, Saintus, I forgot his surname, I think van Skalkwyk.
And Wesley
Douglas.
Yeah.
At least there's three people. Now we need to make sure that those people are protected in Parliament, because there's three people that we are aware of that are lawmakers in Parliament. And how do we keep them accountable?
We need to make sure they're not tokens, like the example you made now.
Yes.
A front.
Yes.
What you complain about? There's three guys.
So I think,
but now these three guys are here, but we don't know. Like you say, they need to be protected. We don't know after their conversation they get.
but also it's not so much around them being tokens. I think it's more about how do we now, they've created a gateway, right? How do we get more of our people in?
They put the foot in the door now. We need to push the door.
How do we get more people in to help drive the agenda to achieve the type of economic and social growth that we need for the people?
How? Do you have the answer? Do you
Look,
have some
we'll
suggestions?
We'll always be a minority, however you look at it. The KHOI-SAN community, whether you want to refer to them as colored or whatever you want to refer to them as, they'll always be a minority.
Yeah.
The black majority will always be the majority. White people have already found a way. Before they gave the country over, they knew how they were going to handle democracy. And part of what we believe is that the law makes provision in terms of that Richtersveld case, and I always refer back to it, that we have a law, our own laws, customary law, section 211 of the Constitution speaks to customary law. And our law is customary law. And the Richtersveld case having made reference to that or referred to that and set precedence that our law is an equal, separate set of laws. It's a separate system of legal system. Now, if we can realize that our power actually lies in our law, our own law, nobody can write our law for us. The Constitution protects that part. So if we can understand it, right, okay, so we have our own law. We can write our own law. We don't need black people, so-called black people, to help us write our law, to write our law for us, or white people or anybody. We can write it ourselves. And we live by those laws. And then impose that on the state and say, right, these are our laws, And the Constitutional Court, which is the highest court of the country, recognizes those laws. So it is about how do we develop that law.
But are there other race groups that did what you do?
The Zulu community operates as the Zulu kingdom, and they operate as South African citizens. They have dual rights in South Africa. We also have that. It's protected by UNDRIP, it's a document, the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous People. And South Africa is a signatory to that. They've ratified that declaration. That says these are the first people of that country. They even sent out the United Nations Working Group on Indigenous Peoples or Indigenous Rights. That was in 2022. That recommendation says these people are the first people of that land and they have dual rights, and the government has done nothing in the past 31 years to restore them their rights that they've had. So that responsibility, the onus is on us now to make sure that how can we develop our law from a commercial law. I mean, we obviously need to shadow, because we are not a developed people. I don't care what anyone is to say in terms of our law. We will need to shadow the existing government structures and laws that are there. How do we now develop ourselves? How do we create commercial laws that will develop our people? Because the minerals belong to us. But do we know how to run those minerals? Do we know how to mine? No. Do we know how to do all of these things? No. But there are certain people that can do that. But how do we now leverage these systems, leverage our law so that we find our place in a country?
But back to the first question I asked, they're not gonna come out outright and say, "Oh shame guys, we took your land, yeah, you can have it back." They're not gonna do that.
We can do that through our law, by asserting our law.
So what we're gonna have to basically do what Zimbabwe did, where it's like, you know what, this is originally ours.
No, we don't have to. This is my view. Maybe you can come in there. My view is we do not have to push anyone out of the equation, because it will be dumb of us to push people out and we don't.
And if we settle the thing and not sure what to do with it.
So learn. The ANC had a document. You can come in after this. The ANC had a document before the democratic dispensation, ready to govern. Powerful thing. Are we ready to govern? Are we ready to take over? Yes, it's good. It belongs to us. Are we ready to take them over and manage them properly?
Unless you end up sitting with what Zimbabwe ended up with, where it's like you can take it, but you can't. You don't know what to do with it after you have it.
So to get back to that point, Larry and Zakes is really, like we were saying, is, you know, how do we move forward and how do we get things to work better so that the benefit is moved into the right direction. I think that is all what we want to achieve, you know, in moving forward and creating the right sort of economic and social wealth for our people. You know, I think if we look at some of the challenges on how to get there, is always going to be, you know, what is our understanding and how much do we know in order to make it happen and to take it to work. You know, another example I'll give, we were working on a project where land was basically given to some black people, just farmland. They were doing some small farming, etc. And a multinational came in and they said, look, we want to empower this farm. Now, commercial farming is a totally different kettle of fish, the way you do business and the way things happen. And as this whole program was going, we found out that it was quite tough to run this program in the farming sector. Now, the challenge you were faced with is, yes, you've got a farm, you're doing a bit of farming, but if you really want to do the right farming, which you say you want to do, there's a lot of things as you as an individual, as a person, need to change. There's lifestyle changes that must happen. You know, if it's during winter and you need to wake up 3 o'clock in the morning to farm, you can't say it's cold.
You must get up and get it done.
Unfortunately, that's what was happening on some of these projects, right? But if you look at what was going on with the traditional farmers or Boer farmers, that small little kid from 3 years old wants to run out at 3 o'clock with his father.
Because he understands, hey.
No, not that he understands. He's 3 years old.
I understand, but the kid is being role model to say that, hey.
He's in the system of agriculture, farming and understanding. And like they say, a farmer, 80% of farming sits in his head. because it's experience, because it's done from those small ages. It's not documented. You can't learn it in textbooks and
You
university.
can feel the soil and you can sense that, okay, this is
You know what's happening. And it's these type of things where we need to say, okay, what's for us, what's not for us, and if it's not for us but you have an interest, this is the roadmap, and it's going to take time, perseverance, and patience. Now sometimes we also lack that as people,
you want instant result.
right? And this is where we start doing all the wrong things to get to a point very quickly, and then we end up doing sometimes the wrong things. And I mean, also, you can be how good, but if nobody comes and says, okay, I'm willing to give you the opportunity now, right? That means nothing. Also, 100% of nothing is also a problem, versus 10% of something, which is also a mindset issue. And under entrepreneurship, there's an interesting sort of methodology or thing that I've learned also through my experiences, is what they call is founder syndrome. You've invented something that's the next best thing to sliced bread, right? But you can't commercialize it, right? Equity funders come forward and they say, we'll take 80% of your business. And you say, no, but it's mine. But there's a reason why they're doing that. Go understand why they're saying they're taking 80% of your business for a third of the money you actually asked for. But you're getting into a network, you're getting into opportunities greater than what you've also just developed. So we also need to sometimes understand how these things really work from an economic and business perspective, how private equity funders work. Yes, they're going to tell you, we'll take 80% of your business and give you a third for what you asked. And then you emotionally feel, these guys want to rob me. You're not seeing business and you're walking away. So there's a lot we also need to learn on those aspects.
Unless you can't do that by yourself, which I mean, that's going to take you, like you say, that's going to take you next 20 years to get to the level where you can fund it yourself.
Yes.
Or these guys are saying, bro, I can give you the money now.
But I mean, if you go, they fund you, you produce the results based on what is agreed. They see your potential and talent. Besides that one opportunity they've partnered with you on. They might identify you and expand you as a person to say, by the way, we've got another board position available. We'd like you to serve on that board as well. Now you're in different companies. But we don't think that far. We want to plan.
Just check, nah, this is my thing. Someone's trying to steal my idea.
There's two questions I want to ask you. I know we're drawing towards the close. We have like a few minutes. There's two questions I want to ask you that I think is very important for the viewers in terms of the objectives of this session that we're having. Now, you've designed enterprise and supplier development programs.
Yeah.
Many of them failed because they built to manage risk. They're not built to create wealth.
Right.
What does a real, radical KHOI-SAN serving development model look like to you?
So firstly, if we look at enterprise and supply development in the South African context, right, the challenge we faced was because it's also legislatively based. We need to look at it, and that has come out as programs based on our BE codes, right? So now you need to also unpack and look at the BE codes and say, from an enterprise and supply development perspective, is if myself as a business has to spend in enterprise and supply development R1 million, I get measured on the input of the million, not of the output result being positive. So that firstly is a big problem, right? So that needs to be looked at, changed, or when looking at developing economic programs where funding is coming through, don't look at the funding coming. Look at the objectives put out that needs to be realistically achieved, right, as the actual goal. And I think that is an important aspect, critical to what we do as our council. And when we sit with multinationals and the Americans, and we had a conversation with the American Chamber last week before last, and they say, no, you can't use those words. So Trump's whole issue around DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is a form of BEE. which has been rather
It's basically American version of
be right, but under that they call it supplier diversity, right, which obviously looks at the economic development of small businesses and inclusion of small businesses and black businesses in the value chain of corporate businesses, because there's a distinct difference in procurement and supply chain, and sometimes our people don't understand it. Develop products and services to integrate into supply chains where you add value. If you're adding value in Coke's supply chain, Coke will never take you out as a service provider because you're bettering their product in the market. And that is what we also need to start looking at. You know, the services our people offer or the opportunities that they want to develop, how does it better the next business they want to service? Not I'm offering you service, pay me. How do I help you grow? Even as a big business. The little intervention I'm doing in your business, what effect is it having in your business? Because then as you grow, I grow. You know, and you then become integrated as a critical component of the supply chain. You know, so this is where they talk about these things of evergreen contracts, which we don't like, right? Which is a big thing. But this is how these contracts are designed and developed when something is integrated into a supply chain that cannot be removed. You know, if you take specific, let's take a company like Bosch and the electronics that go into vehicles. It's so designed. Yes, they're multinationals, but BMW, VW, Mercedes, everybody uses them because of how they work them way in to be a strategic in the supply chain of manufacturing a car.
Even like chips of computers.
Exactly.
Intel work their way into whether it's Apple, whether it's Windows.
Exactly. So for me, those are the type of thinkings and thoughts we need to look at.
I got a supply diversity question. What's the real impact on the supply diversity as it relates to marginalized communities?
So, all I can do is give you our statistics as what we've done. So we currently work with just over 40 corporates in South Africa. Some of our other global agencies have quite a large number of corporate members as well. So we 6 councils around the world that's driving this developmental agenda. But in South Africa, over the last 10 years, we've basically created over 30,000 jobs and supported we've certified just over 1,000 businesses now into the methodology that multinationals want to use over and above BEE, that they look at from a global perspective, but also to date in procurement movement, just over 3 billion, you know, and those are businesses that we've helped get them the initial contracts, help them be structured properly, and outside of that they've grown. So the 3 billion is just what we measure that we've done directly with them.
On a large scale basis.
Yeah, to date. So it's really...
As it relates to marginalized communities.
So it's all marginalized or businesses that we deal with. And a lot of the owners of those businesses come out of marginalized communities. And they've obviously grown their businesses as they've grown. I'm working with somebody that's come now out of Hammanskraal, right? Walmart has now taken his product. And when I say marginalized, I really mean marginalized. But if you look at what he's doing in the plumbing industry and in our critical resource, water, saving environment, for a company like Walmart to recognize this product and now is taking it into 40 countries where they're operating as a South African business, a 37-year-old, I mean, that's great accomplishment.
That's a massive accomplishment.
You know, so these things exist. You know, it's how we further identify it and bring our people closer to us. I think that is...
What kind of backlash would he experience in that space?
When you say backlash?
Like resistance.
Well, it's obviously in the water, sanitation, toilet space. So it's your current conglomerates. You had an incident where a toilet manufacturer that makes the outer side was told by somebody that's a very big manufacturer of the components that go inside that if they take this component, they won't get support from this other company anymore. That's the reality of business.
But that's why
Yeah.
why I asked that question.
But he still entered the market, obviously working with people like ourselves, and we found other better strategies, which is now going to catapult his business. So
We found ways around it.
yeah, so that's why I'm saying it's business, it's competition, it's how do I kill my competitor through what process do I use? I can't compete technically. Do I compete with him legally? Do I compete with him? Do I find something shady on him to bring him down? And it's happened. It happens to all types of businesses where you're gonna take market share. It's
Someone's
a challenge.
gonna feel some type of way.
They say, being the tallest tree, you catch the most wind. And we really need to understand that, and how resilient are you. And for me, what resonates always with me is a statement I'd like to make is doesn't mean you're planting the tree, you're going to sit in the shade. As we go and we develop these things and we want these things to progress, it's important to realize that we're doing it for the people coming
Generationally.
after us.
On that tone, I said I want to ask two questions. This is my second question.
Sure.
You've worked in the energy, finance, STEM, auto fields. Those were the
Yeah.
fields that you've worked in, and more than that. And you've built ownership vehicles, right? If we are serious about building an indigenous economy, a KHOI-SAN economy, where do we start? What should our people be building? What should they be owning? What should they be scaling right now? And what structures must they have in terms of trust, co-ops, equity vehicles? What actually helps us to build intergenerational wealth?
So it will really depend on the business and product and solution and what you want to do with that business, then to determine what structure you take forward. Where do you take it forward as a company? Whether you want to see this product, solution, or service, whatever it is.
But if you can take one of those companies, what would you suggest? One of those fields of interest, what would you suggest would be the way? What should we be building?
Look, I think if we look at where the world is going, right, and if we look at where the challenges are, there's 3-4 major ones: energy, water, food security. So with the KHOI-SAN, land farming
It's a big thing.
is a big thing now, because there's land. How do you take that and then commercialize it? Bring on the right skills to support it and grow it. The likes of and this is the mistakes we make. Let's take farming as an example. So you'll always see, if you go to, let's say, ShopRite, they've got a specific criteria of a tomato. So if you say, I want to supply ShopRite, and you go to ShopRite and say, ShopRite, what is the criteria for tomato to be a supplier of tomatoes to you? And you say, okay, give me the criteria. You then go build your farm according to the criteria to supply them. Don't go build your farm, produce a tomato, and they say it's not to spec. So sometimes we do things because once you've got the one spec right that was given to you and you're supplying there, you've got enough land and profit now to say,
another kind of tomato there.
But the problem is we take this one thing into a process, and now we're saying it looks good, the market must take it, but the market says we don't want it like that. And sometimes that is also a challenge, is how do we really do our research in business? Very important also is accountants and lawyers are important in a business. We weren't people that would look at having lawyers. We're signing contracts, and when things go wrong, you look at the contract, but you've never consulted a lawyer to say, help me with
Before
this.
I sign this thing, what am I getting myself into?
And these are sometimes the challenges that small businesses and people that we make.
Or
We
you're
think,
just excited, you're thinking, hey,
and we read it,
money.
it's making sense to us, but we're not a legal person to interpret it. And an ease can get you R1 million or make you owe R1 million. You know what I'm saying? And these are the type of things we need to look at. I mean, a simple thing like that kills our small businesses is cash flow, right? I sat with people also and I said, you've got a client that's going to pay you in 30 days, right? Go ask your terms at the bank for 45 days. Explain to them your contract. Don't accept the 30 days and accept your loan at the bank on 30 days or your overdraft, because you're never going to meet it. There's always going to be that buffer and that mismatch, and you're going to look bad. Our people also are scared to have those conversations. Our people of color don't negotiate when it comes to rates. They will take the cheapest rate that gets given by a big business, and they will make smaller profits. And then they look at the traditional white business getting double what they're getting. And then they say, but why is that fair? You never went and negotiated, because you didn't want to negotiate, because you thought if you start a negotiation, you're going to lose the business, you know? So there's a lot of these things from a psychological perspective as well that we need to mature on in order to become successful. You know, we need to be able to sit around the table with those people and negotiate these things and give our standpoint and why, you know, but we're not doing that.
But that goes back to the point I made earlier, where I said, as a people, sometimes we're very like, hey, nah, ish, now you ask, no, you ask, nah. You know, we get emotional in the thing. And this is why I mentioned earlier, the new guys coming up now that are more fact-based and robust to say that, no, but why can I not have a better rate? Why, give me, like what you're saying, you need to, because it's true what you're saying. We come there and be like, hey, bruh, just now we don't get a thing. Then you just take whatever. Then when you get home, and you've worked a month, 2 months, and you actually reread it, and you think to yourself, yes, what did I get myself?
Another interesting study before we close off. So we're working on a project now for bulk buying of building material for a group, for their service providers to service them, because what we found out, based on a study, generally traditional big white businesses have track record. So they get the best discounts because they got the biggest contracts. So what happens is the smaller black business goes to the same supplier and says, supply me X. And the guy says, I'm giving it to you at 10 Rand. And this guy is saying, yo, you know, my margins are going to be tight. Where does he cut if he wants to win the business and it's on price? Labor. So what happens? Our black people get paid less because he needs to win that contract. He can't cut on price because he's not a bulk buyer. So the only thing he can look at, and then what should you tell your people? Hey, this is all I can give you. Do you want the job? So we now start with that mentality also, you know, which is wrong. So now with the bulk buying, we bring down the cost of material and we keep his labor price up, and his people can still get paid better.
And the workers are satisfied, yeah.
Right. So these are the concepts and stuff that we need to unpack and look at these challenges, you know. Because that's the biggest challenges in some of these contracts. You know, we're cutting on labor, we're cutting on salaries because we can't.
Sorry to cut you off now. I'm in a space where we have the ability to get, let's just say, even 20 people in a room, business people in a room. I would like to, from my perspective, start, and I mean like start now in the beginning of August, right? I want to host something beginning of August, throughout August, right? For especially for our business guys, right? And I would like to invite you to come onto that panel and to come and sit and have that conversation, because I think this is where all the things you're mentioning is where we're getting it wrong. We're excited, we see the money, hey, this is gonna work, and then the long term things like that, or the sacrificial things like waking up that time and you're like, it's too cold. That's the mindset issues that we're going to have to deal with.
Or the process.
And all the processes. Guys, all your paperwork in place. So from a church perspective, what we have now is we have a department called Edu Crew, right? Yeah. And what the Edu Crew does is that we saw the same issue, especially with our people, and we decided to rectify that issue. Now, I want to rectify that issue from a business perspective also, because we came and we have someone that's running that team that works at UJ, right? And she sits in a high position in UJ, and she sits and deals with the people who are handing in their forms, and she sits and sees that this one didn't fill this in, this didn't fill that in, this one hands out the form after the due date, and this. So we said, how can we rectify this thing? We said, okay, let's start a department as part of a church, as part of a community service, to say that we're servicing our community, to say, guys, this thing of you're supposed to have this thing in the year before to register for this. What our brown people end up doing is January now. Now the mother must go stand in the line. Yeah, well, my contact accept me what? Auntie, hello. You were supposed to fall in this thing last year, September, October. You coming now January, standing in the line, fighting with us.
Yeah.
And we've had to now rectify it. And now already we're coming out, telling the congregation, telling everyone that's involved, guys, listen, if your child is in matric or in 11, now, come now. Don't wait until January where you now fighting with the university because your child can't be accepted and this, that, and the other. Come now. So we can rectify this issue. We can help you fill in the paperwork because sometimes it's intimidating also. You print out a thing with 30 pages of something. You're thinking, yeah, I don't know what the hell is going on here. It's intimidating. And you see it and you're not sure. Like you said earlier, you don't have a lawyer. You don't know who to ask for help. You don't know. Here at the end of the day, you're just signing things because it's not here. Because you just want to get done and hey, that you can't net college to gaan, you know. But at the end of the day, we came and we recognized this thing is a problem. We need to help our people.
Yeah.
Here's the lady, she works there. She's getting the application. She can see what they're catching on and how they're getting it wrong. We entered this space and we said, guys, come now. If you don't know how to fill in this thing, we're going to have a whole class. We have it in the side wall here. 100 students come. We sit down. We say, okay, let's go through this application process. Come, point one. This is what they mean when they're saying this. It's tedious. It's boring. It's long. It's irritating. It's frustrating. But it must be done.
Exactly.
And so that's the point. I would like to invite you for something like that also, where we take time, proper time. Where we sit and say, gents, the reason you're struggling just because you fill this thing in wrong. The reason you do it because you registered your business as a CC instead of a PTY Ltd. The reason you're getting this wrong is because you didn't fill in this. This is how this thing actually works. You must fill in this. Go there. I can help you here. I can help you there. Would you be open to something like that?
Look, I'll definitely be open to something like that. I'd like to participate, give back my time where I can, and add the value where I can. So, for me, I'm on board.
Thank you, sir.
Great. I think those are the types of things that we need to see happen because that's where we're meeting, we're bridging the gap. That's how you actually bridge the gap. There's another question that I wanted to ask you. I think also one of the main questions on the theme of this is how do we get brown businesses or brown people, brown businesses to invest in the KHOI-SAN movement, whichever movement it is that is advancing the KHOI-SAN struggle. How do we get the business involved in this movement?
Look, I think...
as a businessman yourself.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, is we need to look at how engrossed in the sense of positively are they in this ideology of the KHOI-SAN. Because there's a lot of our people out there, how much do they understand? And what some people maybe understand certain things on the surface. Maybe they need to be called in and be given information on where this is going, as a starting point, and really understand, where's their real interest, and what do they want to see work, because there's a lot of the information, a lot of things happening, but what is going to, I wouldn't say entice, but catch their attention for them to see that this is the right way and this is what we need to start supporting for our people, and also see what is it that they want to grow that can incorporate our people, and when you say invest, there's lots of elements to look at from an investment perspective. So I think if the right information is put together and packaged to some of the people that's at certain levels and say to them, this is where we're heading, this is what we want to do, this is actually what we want to develop, this is where we're positioned, and I think that would be a starting point, because it's not very easy, and I'm being very objective because I sit across a number of elements from time to time, and it's like really like some people say, they're gonna say, what do you have? Give me some information. Or let's first start with the history. It's like when I was in another point in my life where kind of like got to understand politics because I took an interest. When I sat and I had debates with people around politics, the debate wouldn't last a minute. Because the first thing I would ask, did you read the constitution of the country if you want to talk politics? And they look at you, what do you mean? I said, it's senseless, we're going to discuss anything. So it's, what do we give our people as a foundation, to understand what this is and really buy into where this needs to go to create the sustainability of the people.
I'm asking that because I'm thinking there's a lot of companies that you've mentioned, Cecil, there's a lot of companies you mentioned. How do we get companies like that to buy into a vision like this and say, right, because there's a community that is being served, people that needs to be empowered, and there's a vehicle that is driving something like that, but also needs assistance from corporates like Cecil, like companies like yourself, councils like you are involved in. How do we get them to be part of that
I think what we need to do is look at it from a commercial business perspective. Let's keep it business when we speak to those type of organizations. And as much as we see it, let's move away from corporate social investment. Because look, it needs to be there, but let us not think in that lines when we want to do business. Yes, enterprise development and those enablements is important to help. But one thing you'll understand with enterprise development is you can be in a system, right? And this was one of the challenges where a company, a big multinational, would be funding a company to grow because they need to meet the B scorecard. But that very same company doesn't have a contract with that company.
Doesn't make sense.
Because there's a different legal process again. Now, our people sometimes don't understand these things. And it's not that, sometimes by design, but then also sometimes by ignorance, by law of the business. Enterprise development is separate to you getting business because there's a quoting system you must be registered on, there's compliance stuff, and. But although they're developing you, they should ready you. But why would they not do that in some instances? Because the current service provider somehow is linked somewhere.
They got a deal already.
And these are the things that sometimes when we look at, when you say sometimes these programs don't work, it's because these are the challenges in it. Because you can fund and skill somebody, but if they're not bringing back a return through sales, which is business and profit, then you don't have a business. If there's no money coming in, if there's no money coming into a business, there's no business, because that's the bottom line. And it's how do we get businesses into that economic thinking and to get them that access. So enterprise and supply development or supply diversity, which is my focus and I'm passionate about, the reality is what makes a business grow is procurement, getting a deal, invoicing, and getting paid. That's what makes a business grow. Enterprise and supply development is only the enabling tools. It's not it's not what's paying. Yeah.
Yes, I think this conversation needs to continue. But we have reached our time. We actually gave ourselves some extra time.
Okay.
Because I think it was it's an important thing, and it can't be the problems of the world cannot be solved in an hour's conversation.
No, not at all.
We have to, and that's why I want to go down the route. In fact, not want to. We are going down the route of, okay, let's get those who are interested into a room. How interested are you? No, very interested. Okay. Yes, Peter is coming from the space. Yes, so-and-so is coming from the space. Let's get into this and let's help you understand this world. Much like what we're doing with the education. I don't know what I'm signing. I don't know where to go. I don't know when it opens. Okay, come. We're going to help you. We're going to show you when you must fill in, what you must fill in, how you must fill in, explain to you what it means so that you understand. Is this for you, like you said earlier? Is it not for you? Is it something you want to try? Something you don't want to try? Because again, not everyone is business owners. Not everyone CEOs. Other people like a 9 to 5. They get their salary, they go home, they fine with that. They don't necessarily feel like, because running a business is a lot. No. It's not a walk in the park. It is a lot. There's a lot of demons you have to fight, like the ones you mentioned earlier. When you come in there and it's like, yo.
No, it's like,
go for it.
There's a simple saying as well is And we had and it's also based on experience. You know, I'll never forget. You know, the challenge we also have is somebody wins a multi-million rand contract. What's the first thing they do?
Go buy cars.
No. But what is the first thing they should be doing besides going to buy cars? The first thing they do is, besides just generally, they go and they think they've made it. They don't realize the day you sign that contract or you get awarded, that's when the work starts. You can't worry with it. So our whole mindset also needs to shift.
You must go work now.
Now the hard work
job.
starts. Now the work starts. It's not, hey, we signed it, it's time to relax and enjoy. No, there's no enjoyment. You know, and that's the reality of entrepreneurship and a business owner. You know, and it's not about chasing the money. The money must follow you. You know, so there's a lot that goes into, and when
But
you follow the
again-
success of entrepreneurs,
But
you
it's
find
that mindset like what you're saying now, because the problem is with the mindset we're dealing with now is that 10 mil, yeah, can koop no for me. You want to come and show that once he got a new Lambo because he feels he can afford that Lambo. Next thing you know, and that's what happens all over in government as well. You find out those people got us contracts for X amount. Remember that story with the field or the stadium that they were supposed to. Later on, it was dirty, broken grass. Grass was growing here, there's sand, and then they had one of those school benches there, and then they did a ribbon cutting thing for it. And it's like, it was like 100 million contract or something. You're like, oh, guys, how did you do all this money? And you show us a field with some grandstands there, with like one block of stands. And even with the one with the pole, with the flagpole, you remember that one? I think it was now 4 or 5 years ago with the flagpole. It was also awarded a big contract, and then there was one pole somewhere in the middle of a field. And it's just like, hi guys. And the people who had the contract were buying cars and houses and going crazy. But yeah, that's some of the stuff. But Peter, thank you for coming through.
No,
this
thank
morning.
you
Thank you for your time.
for inviting me.
I just wanna, this last thing that I wanna ask you or say, not ask, is we have a march that is coming up. The march is designed to speak to, we're marching to Parliament. It's actually a national march, a KHOI-SAN march, right? And the main focus of this march is the devolution of power. It's our participation in the democratic dispensation as lawmakers. Because once you make laws, you can look after your needs, right? So this march is taking place between the 1st of September in different provinces and the 4th of September, right? The 4th of September is in Cape Town. We'll be marching to Parliament, and we are still negotiating this, a sitting with Parliament, having an audience as a nation-to-nation engagement with Parliament on the 4th. So in terms of that, you as a businessman and having relationships with different people as well, do you see yourself being involved in something like that, part of, you know, making sure that us as a people are part of the devolution of power, and assisting us in making sure that thing is a success?
Look, I think we can have further discussions around that. So yeah, we can definitely do that.
Okay.
Perfect. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for everyone that was watching. Thank you for everyone online. We definitely appreciate your time. I hope you got some sort of value out of this. I got value out of it, and I know
100%.
the guys in the room were having a nice conversation. But so, family, thank you. Please do subscribe. Please hit the like button. Also hit the bell, and share this with people who perhaps would be interested in conversations like this. And then also we'll let you know when those lectures or talks will be held. And then for those of you who are interested, please do then come through and come and listen and come and, you know, pay attention, get some knowledge and understanding in that regard. So thank you so much for watching. See you on the next one. Love you.
Imagine if you have your vision as the car with the right team. Imagine how quick that vision will come into the footsteps. Something that was taking 5 years, 3 months.
This morning is all about leadership and influence.